This is a bit of an ad hoc video because I'm in the process of listening to an interview with David Benatar being interviewed by Sam Harris, and I love philosophical arguments. I actually am in love with philosophical arguments. They're tough for me to get because I don't have a philosophical training. Like I was never trained in philosophy. I mean, I have a BFA, so I mean, obviously philosophy kind of puts itself in there when it comes to artwork and how various concepts of humanity have been interpreted over the years, etc., etc. So there's some philosophy in there, and I think the closest I ever got to philosophy was with Deleuze and Guattari when they were talking about the body without organs, which is a concept that has fascinated me for a long time, and I think it still does play a role in my thinking sometimes. But I don't think it doesn't have a lot to do with what I want to say. But I guess what I'm saying is that the philosophy or the more philosophical arguments about life are pretty interesting and kind of layered, and they're layered and they're very complex, and it makes me want to pursue a philosophy degree, but I have no means to. So I mean, I'll probably drop out anyway. But yeah, Yaron Brook. He is a philosophy professor, I think, at the Ayn Rand Institute. And he was on the Rubin Report the other day talking about how the new atheists see life, how they understand life. And he believes that they, Dave Rubin basically said he can't speak for the new atheists, but, Yaron Brook brought the issue up either way of the new atheists basically seeing life through a Christian morality lens. And I could kind of see where that comes in. Like, I mean, you talk about things like suicide or the beauty of life or things like that, and you end up in this weird space where it seems very Christian, or it feels very Abrahamic anyway, that life should continue and life should flourish and life should exist. I mean, there's even the St. Augustine argument. I think it's St. Augustine that existence is the proof of God, because the absence of existence is the proof of evil and the devil, etc., etc. Which I find very simplistic and kind of weird to digest. But yeah. So Yaron Brook on the Rubin Report basically said that the new atheists pull a lot of their morality from Christian morality. It's just that they explain it in a scientific way. But I've read The Selfish Gene with that Richard Dawkins put out in 1975. Maybe it might have been later, but I read the updated version, by the way. And I think a lot of that Christian morality can be trumped by basically by biological altruism. I think the need for life to flourish, etc., etc., can be explained genetically. I think it can be explained through biology and genetics in terms of altruism, and I don't see a problem there. I don't see that. And for Sam Harris specifically speaking, it feels like I mentioned in his interview and I kind of trailed off, but for Sam Harris specifically speaking, I think his moral landscape kind of adapts to changing environments and doesn't look at a narrow Christian view of what morality is and what Christian life is. Like, the moral landscape seems to explain differences in the way people think about how different modes of understanding work when it comes to suffering and well-being, etc., etc. So I'm really enjoying this interview with David Benatar and Sam Harris, and I don't take notes, which is something I should be doing. So when an idea comes into my head, I kind of have to put it out there, right? But I mean, do I think there's an asymmetry between suffering and not suffering, or suffering and pleasure? Yes, I think that there is. one of the reasons this interview kind of really interested me is because I have this very personal view that I think suffering is much greater in the world than pleasures. I think if you think about your being from second to second, you're always suffering. There's always some pain. There's always some itch. There's always some mental duress, or like, you know, there's always something that's pulling you in the direction of suffering. It's just, that is an asymmetry that does exist. And I do think that the value placed on life, you know, it kind of goes back to Sam Harris's moral landscape as well. Like, I mean, the value we put on life is largely made up amongst ourselves, right? Like, there's no doubt about that. You know, I'm not being very nuanced right now, but I mean, you know, there's no doubt that suffering is far ever more present than pleasure. I mean, it's just a matter of fact. If you think about a person that experiences pleasure all the time, you're thinking about some sort of simulated world, like some sort of like a you know, I don't know, stasis tank or something, where you just have a bunch of cords plugged into your brain and blah blah blah, all Matrix-like, right? Like, I mean, but even, you know, just to trail off on the Matrix, I mean, even the Matrix knows that people love suffering, right? Like, I mean, so from whatever perspective, I mean, whether you suffer, I suffer, I don't know, somebody's got to suffer, right? But I mean, you know, there is much more suffering in the world than there are pleasures, and I know, you know, the world is getting better, you know, when it comes to the degree of suffering that people have in their everyday lives. So you think about, you know, Steven Pinker and you know, the better angels of our nature, et cetera, et cetera. And so, I mean, life is getting better, but I mean, even by those standards, you know, there's a lot more suffering in the world. Like, there just is, and you know, I don't believe that there's a value to life. Like, the value being sort of the pro-birth argument, right? Like, there is a value to bringing to birth. Like, I mean, there isn't really. Like, I mean, anyway, this is a weird video because there's so much to unpack. But I'm going to continue listening to the interview and, you know, think about things. And, you know, I've had a few of these as well. So, I mean, you know, I'm kind of not in a position to make any conclusive arguments. But, yeah, there is no real value to life. And I know Jordan Peterson, like, he kind of goes on about the value of having lots of kids and, like, you know, things like that. But I don't know, those arguments kind of fall to this biblical realm of morality, and I don't necessarily agree with it. But anyway, that's all for now. Bye.